I'm actually frustrated with the education, with the math education of my kids now.
There's always a gap of kids that get dropped in the process of getting new curriculums.
Can't get to all of the core material that I need to because I'm spending time with the mathematics of it.
It didn't come in here without controversy. There was a lot of controversy. There still is a lot of controversy.
Peninsula School District has recently switched to a different math curriculum. Until 1997, Peninsula School District taught math the traditional way with computation, equations, rules, and theorems. In traditional, the teacher taught the students and the students memorized the information. Due to new state revisions and a push for a better math and science education in the country, a new style of teaching was implemented, called Reform Math. Reform, or New Math, is based on the idea that students should learn mathematical concepts by investigating the world around them, to lead to discovery, opposed to students directly being told these ideas. In order to do this, Reform has a lot of focus on hands-on learning with text-heavy application problems, collaboration with peers, and logical thinking, as well as a focus on multiple approaches to problems, such as having students use pictures and words to explain their thinking. In 1997, the Washington State Assessment of Student Learning, also known as the WASL, began to test new state revisions that had been implemented. In 2002, Reform Math was started beginning at the elementary level. The first program that is currently in the elementary schools is called Investigations. At the middle school level, the curriculum is CMP, or Connected Math Project. And in high school, the curriculum is called CORE. Many adults today grew up learning the traditional method, with Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, and Trigonometry. This style was filled with practice problems, but lacked the connection to the real world.
The old series was far more user-friendly. It was easier for students because there were more examples of problems, more guidelines with math basics, rules, theorems, all of that in their algorithms. And there were all the examples, so it was easier for kids to use. There was far less actual application of how do you use it in real life. And that was kind of where people didn't like it, is because it didn't make that connection to real life.
In traditional, students were given math rules, and they practiced a lot with these concepts through repeated computation. Reform, on the other hand, spends a lot of time leading students to discover math concepts without being given the formula. This eliminates time for repeated practice, and therefore students are not quick with simple but widely needed math computation. Though, Reform Math does provide a strong connection between math in the classroom and math in the outside world.
The Connected Math Project does everything based on real life, has no examples in the book. It's very difficult for kids to use when they were absent because there's nothing for them to look back on. It's very difficult for parents to help kids with. There's very little practice because you're discovering constantly, you're applying it constantly. You never actually get to practice over and over.
It's text heavy. Kids have to be able to read and navigate through a lot. It's struggling. It's not being given the perfect formula and then doing it 30 times, what we're normally seeing.
Where the kids get more aha experiences, where kids work together and don't leave me as the perfect person to give them the answer.
Investigations and discovering are used constantly throughout Reform for students to understand the broad applications and meaning behind math concepts.
It's basically it's just like a process where it kind of introduces you to a subject and has you figure out your own process for figuring out like what the lesson's about. So it doesn't just like tell you, you just kind of do these little problems and eventually you supposedly build up the knowledge until you're ready for the big one.
A normal day in traditional consists of a lesson for that day and repeated practice of similar problems. A normal day in Reform can be very different.
Well, there's really two general styles that she uses. Is most of the time she'll just tell us like, okay, your assignment is investigation 1, lesson 2, and then give us a page number and tell us to start working in our small groups of 4 students. Yeah. and then we just work through the period, and if we need help, we go fetch her or whatever. But then half the time, the other half is she'll kind of lead a lesson of her own outside of the book, like when she feels will prepare us for the bookwork, and sometimes the bookwork is kind of vague and ambiguous about what it wants us to do. So she kind of takes control and does her own little math lesson on top of what we're already doing in the book. And those days tend to go much better because she's actually leading the class as opposed to having student-led groups of 4, where basically you're having this other students, the ones who actually understand it, teach to other students, as opposed to having a teacher who understands it a lot better than the good students teaching the other students.
Originally, Peninsula School District had a traditional approach to teaching math. Then they switched to an integrated program similar to traditional, but blended all the subject areas together. The most significant switch occurred in 2002 when a complete reform curriculum was started. This push was from the state government with new standards because Washington students were not strong in math.
So when our state test came out in 1997, it reflected those new standards, and that students in the area of mathematics were not just to take the basic skills and do them. They were to take the basic skills and do them, and then think and communicate about them and connect them to other pieces of math. And that all came from actually internationally. It's actually a national movement. It actually started with the international study, the Third International Math and Science Study, and why we were behind other countries. So that's kind of how the reform movement all started, was all based on that study and the research and how we think about math in this country. So it was kind of an interesting start, but when our state assessment then reflected those standards so that kids still definitely, I can't show you the state test, but definitely have to do the basic skills, and then in addition they have to apply them and think about them and communicate them. Well, when the state test asks the students to do that, if you go back to a very traditional math program that just has lists of problems to do, then they're not going to be at all able to perform on our state assessment. So we had to make that match.
The teacher support was there, and it was there big time. There was big bucks and lots of time for us to get used to this curriculum, get the training we needed, because I think it was evident from the beginning that this was a big shift for a lot of old-time, shall I say, standard math teachers. And not everybody was receptive, and that's always happens with change.
Even though a long process took place to implement the reform math, one science teacher was unaware anything had ever changed.
It was one of those slow things that happens so slowly, like dimming the lights, that you might catch you off guard. And so you kind of, one day you finally wake up and you go, the room's dark.